Journals are tools for your mind. You can use them to collect your thoughts all in one place. You can look back on your thoughts in your journal in order to remember what you were thinking and when. And you can use journals to reflect on your thoughts, to sharpen them and strengthen them in order to help you become a better thinker. Those are just some of the benefits of keeping a journal, and there are a lot of different ways you can go about keeping a journal. But one of my favorite ways to journal is to keep a deep thinking philosophy journal. Hey, welcome to Park Notes. I'm Parker Sedicase, and this is a channel where I help you study and think more deeply. In this video, I'm going to lay out how you can think and journal like a philosopher. In order to do that, I'm going to distinguish journaling from keeping a diary and a commonplace book and other things that you can do with notebooks. I'll then lay out 3 key features for thinking like a philosopher, and then I'll apply those features to journaling to help you journal like a philosopher. So make sure you watch the whole video so you can get clear on how to keep a deep thinking philosophy journal. Let's jump right in. I keep journals, I keep diaries, I keep compendiums and collections, I keep books of soliloquies, I keep commonplace books, I keep pocket notebooks, I keep all sorts of notebooks because they're tools for helping me get to know myself, get to collect my ideas, and think more clearly. So before we get into the specifics about how to journal like a philosopher, I want to make some distinctions between keeping a diary, keeping a journal, keeping a commonplace book, just a regular old notebook, a book of soliloquies, all that good stuff. So let's get clear. What do I mean by journaling? Okay, so first things first, let's distinguish a diary from a journal. These are my distinctions. So if you don't like these, you don't have to make them. These are my stipulative definitions I'm stipulating. And this is what I mean by a diary and a journal. I know that this says journal on it, but I use it as diary. Don't get confused. A diary is just a book that is used to record your daily experiences and events as they happen. I think this has to do more with your feelings. Here's what happened to me today, and here's how I feel about it. I think it's more time-bound. I think it's a daily practice. A journal, on the other hand, I think of as a personal record of your thoughts and ideas. I don't think this necessarily has to be a daily type thing, but here's what I'm thinking, and here's what I think about what I'm thinking. Here are my ideas, here are my thoughts, and here are my thoughts about my thoughts. Metacognition type stuff. So I used to do this every single day. I have tons and tons of diaries, but then I became a philosopher, and now all I do is think all day long. No, just kidding. But I don't keep a daily diary any longer. Personal diaries are just that. They're very personal, so I don't want anyone else looking at these. I'll probably burn these before I die. My notebooks, on the other hand, I'm glad for other people to look at these. I want them to see my ideas, my thoughts. What did I think about my thoughts? See me scratch out my ideas and argue against myself. I love that. If I ever become somebody, you can look at my journals, but not my diaries. Now, I also keep commonplace books. Commonplace books are collections of quotes and even thoughts about quotes. These are from some of my favorite books. This is a theology commonplace book. And these are all just quotes from my favorite books for me to reflect on them and make them part of who I am. I also keep what I call compendiums. These are just collection of things systematically gathered and presented as a whole. Compendium means weighed together. So this is very similar to a commonplace book, but it has to do with concise, detailed information, like an encyclopedia. So I have a compendium for all of my passwords, for all the different apps and emails and all that stuff. I hide this in my home. You'll never, ever, ever find this. But I have a compendium for my passwords because I have way too many to remember. And I keep a compendium for wisdom. I collect wise statements and I put them in here for myself, for me to become a wise man and to pass on to my children someday. It's a collection of wise statements brought together into one book, weighed together, compendium, and presented as a whole. I keep a book of soliloquies to get to know myself better. I just started this one this year, so there's a lot of room for more notes. But this is something between a diary and a journal. It's my thoughts and emotions and feelings, but it's getting to know myself. It's a soliloquy, a conversation with myself. I keep a collection of my best ideas. I just slap them in here, and when I want to think about them more, I will move them into another journal to think about them more deeply. But this is just a catch-all. It's where I'm catching all the ideas that I think are good, slap them into here, and then I move them to the appropriate notebooks as needed. And I also keep a pocket notebook. This is a true catch-all. I bring it with me everywhere, and when I have any kind of idea or to-do list or whatever, it goes in here. Then I review it several times throughout the day, and I add notes to wherever the note needs to go. I make sure that I get it there, but this is just my daily capture system. I have a pocket notebook, and I'm going to make a video about this in the future, so stay tuned. All that to say, I have a particular view of what a journal is. It's for capturing your ideas. It's for thinking about your own thoughts. I used to keep a deep thinking philosophy commonplace book. I would add lots and lots of quotes in here, and then I would ruminate on them, and I would turn them into blog posts and papers. So you'll see lots of block quotes, and then some of my thoughts underneath, lots of page numbers, lots of manic writing and scribbling all throughout here. And then I would often structure them into arguments and ideas for blog posts, philosophy papers, theology papers, and all that good stuff. But recently I've separated my deep thinking philosophy journal from my philosophy commonplace book. I still keep a philosophy commonplace book where I will put block quotes and I'll put my own thoughts on them and I'll structure it for my philosophy papers. But I found it necessary to keep a philosophy deep thinking journal. I will take this and only this to a coffee shop. I will write down an idea at the top as a heading, and then I will let it rip in a deep thinking session where I come up with arguments and counter arguments. I try to get clear on concepts, and I try to think deeply about interesting ideas. So I distinguish my deep thinking philosophy journal from my commonplace books in that I'm not adding huge block quotes in here. This is where I'm doing my deep work, my hard work of thinking through interesting ideas, coming up with arguments, anticipating counter examples and counter arguments, dealing with those, and thinking deeply. If I come up with a good thought in here, I will add it to my other notebooks, and I'll find quotes that support my argument or counter examples from papers I've read or books I've read, journal articles. But this is not a commonplace book. This is a journal. These are mostly my thoughts, and it represents my own deep thinking. So now that we've gone over some distinctions and how you can use notebooks, and we've given a characterization of what it means to keep a journal, let's briefly cover what it means to think like a philosopher. Now, thinking like a philosopher is at once very easy and very, very difficult. It's easy because these three features I'm going to go over are relatively simple and easy to learn. On the other hand, this is a very difficult task because the better you get at using these three features, the harder they get. As you get better at doing philosophy becomes more difficult. I've been studying philosophy for over 10 years, and I'm still learning how to do it. I started a podcast where I talk with the world's leading philosophers and theologians in order to continue learning what is philosophy and how does someone do it well. One of the clearest answers I found on what it means to do philosophy comes from philosopher Mike Huemer. He's one of the best living philosophers doing it right now, so I'll let him tell you in his own words.
So basically, what you should do in philosophy is, number one, be clear, like in what you're saying, so people know what the hell you're saying. Number two, give arguments for your views if they're not obvious. Like if you're taking a controversial view, give a reason for it. And number three, address objections. Like what would the counter argument be from the other side, and then talk about that and then try to say your response. So like those are the three main things you have to do.
So that's a clip from my podcast, Parker's Pensies. You can find a link to that, somewhere up here. But I told you the three features are pretty easy. Be clear, give arguments, anticipate counter arguments and objections, and then address those. If you do those three things, you can start doing philosophy today. But as you get better at these three, it becomes more and more difficult. You get better at coming up with counter arguments to your own arguments. But it's all part of the process. It's both exhilarating and horrifying and terrible. But welcome to philosophy. Now let's apply these three features to journaling like a philosopher. So now that we have a distinction between a journal and commonplace books and diaries and notebooks in general and all that other stuff, and we've covered the three key features of doing philosophy, of how to think like a philosopher, let's get into some practical application, and I'll show you how I use these three features in my deep thinking philosophy journal. So keeping a deep thinking philosophy journal is actually pretty easy. All you need is a notebook. Go find a place that is conducive to deep thinking. Then come up with an idea that fascinates you, that intrigues you, that helps you generate other thoughts. Write that down and then be clear. Define your terms. What do I mean by X, Y, and Z? Give arguments for your position. Why do I think this position is better than the alternatives? And then address counter arguments and counter examples. What might someone else say about this? What might someone who's a proponent of a rival explanation say in regards to my own arguments? Where are my arguments weak? Where do they need improvement? Where are they most susceptible to being attacked, to being shown false? Anticipate objections and then address those objections. It'll make your thinking clearer. It'll make your arguments stronger. So let me give an example. Here's a recent entry from July 20th. I've been thinking a lot about the philosophy of artificial intelligence, and even the word artificial intelligence is intriguing to me. Is the intelligence in AI, is it really artificial or is it alien? Just because AI systems don't think the way that we think, does that mean that they are fake intelligence, or are they alien? Are they just different intelligence systems with different reasoning processes, but which still come to the same end product? Intuitively, I think that artificial intelligence is not real intelligence. I think artificial is a great word for it. I don't think real, genuine reasoning is going on. So I need to be clear about that. I need to give arguments in favor of that. I've come up with this distinction between derivative and intrinsic intelligence. I got that from John Searle's work in Mystery of Consciousness and Intentionality. He makes a distinction between intrinsic and derivative intentionality and information, and so I'm applying that to intelligence. But I need to get clear on what exactly artificial intelligence systems are. I think they're algorithms made of symbols which manipulate other symbols. And I think any intelligence which is present in the algorithm is actually a representation of the intrinsic intelligence of the programmer who designed the algorithm. It's like an extension of their intelligence. And I think this is intuitive and can be brought out if we talk about praise and blame. If an AI system does something good, I think it's weird to praise that algorithm. Instead, the praise ought to terminate on the programmer who made the algorithm. Wow, you did a great job. You're very intelligent. You're very smart. Look what you were able to do through this algorithm. But I also want to address counter-arguments and counter-examples. What about an algorithm or AI system that was made not by one person, but by a whole group of people? Where does the praise terminate there? Are you saying there's a group agent? If there's a group agent that deserves praise because of the product of an algorithm, there's not one intrinsic agent who's responsible for that algorithm. If that's the case, then why do you think the algorithm itself can't be praiseworthy? So that's a potential counter-argument or counter-example that I need to address in my paper. Now, I'll probably give a deflationary view saying that there's no such thing as group agents, but all the blame or praise that is due to a group ought to actually be distributed out amongst its members, and we shouldn't think of the group as like its own individual agent or anything like that. But this is a huge literature, and there's going to be lots of counterexamples and counterarguments, and I'm going to have to take positions and be clear and give arguments and then address other arguments, and that's what philosophy is. This also has implications for trees, whether or not like trees represent intelligent systems or beehives and all that stuff. So someone may say, well, trees are systems and they look like they do intelligent things, and there may be intelligence inherent in a tree, but no one designed a tree. Well, maybe someone did design trees. So now we're back to philosophy of religion. Does God exist? Did he design trees, or did they come about by natural, unguided processes? So all this stuff is at play when I'm thinking about whether or not trees and algorithms are intelligent in my deep thinking philosophy sessions here in my deep thinking journal. Now, that's probably way too much detail for a lot of you, but I hope that doesn't dissuade you from keeping your own deep thinking philosophy notebook. You don't have to be a grad student in philosophy to do this. All of you can do this, and I encourage you all, do this. It will sharpen your mind, and I actually think it'll make you a better person. If you're anticipating objections from other people, I think that'll make you better at empathy. What would someone else think about this? Well, how would they feel? What would it be like to be that person looking at my arguments? I'm not saying it's going to make you an amazing person, but it has the potential to make you more empathetic and less arrogant about your own positions. Okay, so to sum it all back up, if you want to keep a deep thinking philosophy journal, if you want to journal like a philosopher, you got to do at least 3 things. Be clear, give arguments, anticipate objections and counter-arguments, and address those counter-arguments. Work those thoughts out in your deep thinking philosophy journal. Now, I want to hear from you guys. What are some intriguing ideas that you're going to think about in your philosophy journals? Let me know in the comments. Leave me a like and make sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on any future videos on study habits and tips and journaling advice and all sorts of philosophy of AI nonsense. I'll see you guys next time.